Because the next is a fun, and I call it sneaky. But even if you are a designated facilitator of the meeting, or the one who's running the meeting, it works very well. But the sneaky one can work as well. We waste hundreds of millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of hours that we waste for each other. In a bad meeting, the designated person never sets up facilitation. They abdicate facilitation. Everybody is unhappy. So these techniques work. And they save a lot of time and energy, especially if you set up good meetings. And you're not just setting the meeting up for failing. Use those 3 emails to set good meetings. So a lot of information, opinion, and action is already done. And really, putting heads together is really, truly needed at this time, as opposed to just informing people. That could be an email. Okay. So this is very high yield and very, very easy to do. The easiest thing I'm teaching you today is this. And the context is respectful communication. Do not use this disrespectfully. That's my warning to you. You try using it disrespectfully, you will lose reputation. You will be just as bad as other people. Be tactful, take a breath, and you'll realize this works great. Okay. So I will walk you through 6 most common problems. 80-20 rule applies here. These are 80% of the problem, root cause of bad meetings, and you will solve 80% of bad meetings. Problem number 1, a meeting starts without a clear purpose. Has that happened to you? Nobody knows what the purpose is, or you don't know what the purpose is. Has that happened to you? Yeah? Yes? Yes. Anybody? Or are you having very deep, purposeful meetings? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chad. Yes, frequently, yes. So what does a facilitator do, of course, if you are the designated one? Start with the one with a clear purpose. At the end of the meeting, you should be or we should be, right? It's the same thing. However, a sneaky one can say, now watch what the sneaky one says. Excuse me, I may have missed it. Can you please take a second to go over the overall purpose of the meeting and what we need to have when we're done? This helps me stay focused, make sure I don't go off on unimportant topics. What's the overall purpose of this meeting? What is the effect? Do you hear how respectful it is? And how the sneaky facilitator is taking all the fault on themselves? Yeah, do you see that? Or are they saying, you're bad, you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting my time, you didn't tell us what we're doing here? Do you hear the respect in the communication? That's where you have to be respectful. This can sound sarcastic. Yes, thank you, honey versus vinegar. This is where people will look at you every time you speak that he or she is gonna bring the meeting into consensus, that we need to know what the purpose is. How often does the discussion go off track? Quite often? Not often? You guys having very focused meetings, unfocused meetings, disorganized meetings? What does a sneaky facilitator do? Respectfully. Oh, these are excellent points we're discussing. I know we have to get back to our always chances. I know we have to get back to our main topic, but I don't want to lose these points. Can we record them on an issues list so we can discuss them later? Later. That's the key word. And if the main facilitator sees this, the main facilitator has a parking lot of ideas ahead of time. Shame on you if you don't set this up in a meeting. Somebody's going off topic. You say, this is fantastic stuff we're discussing, but I want to get back to our main topic. How about I put it on the parking lot right now? If we have time, we'll come back to this. How does this sound? So things are not going off track, but you're being respectful and bringing the thing back on track. Okay, so the main facilitator calls it the parking lot, but the sneaky one can just say, oh, let's get back to our main topic. Isn't this easy to you? Yes, that's right. Sean said Dr. Morris said it sounds great and does work because he's going to show you how he used it. But here's the thing. These 6 will solve so much of your problems that if you have a parking lot, start with a good, clear purpose, and then use these other 5 things, you will end up having good meetings with the background foundation of good emails. So good meetings don't happen without good emails ahead of time. And that's where all those meeting techniques start to fail if that work hasn't been done. So people really feel compelled to come there and not listen to you boringly present information after information. Okay. I've seen way too many MEC meetings go like this, and it goes nowhere, or used to. So the next one is one person is dominating or disrupting. What do you do? That happens, right? One person is dominating or disrupting. Oh, this is an important point we are discussing, and Joe has openly shared his views. It'll be great to hear everyone else's opinion on this one. Can we go around the room and have others give their view? I'll start. I'll be glad to start because I wrote it on point number 4, but it belongs here as well. I'll be glad to start. So you're telling Joe, yes, I know what you're talking about, but, well, here's the thing, Sean. When you call them out, the reaction generally is defensive. But what I'm suggesting is if you try that, you will see that you're encouraging others. Because whenever there's a group, there are people who agree with Joe as well. That's just basic group dynamics. Well, but if you use this methodology, you don't have to call them out at all. You're calling the others out. That's the methodology. That respectfully, you're telling them, yes, you're done sharing, but I want to hear from others and I'll be glad to start. Instead of saying, oh, you're talking too much, that kind of thing. Okay, you can always start with excuse me. Okay, there's no way, no matter how gentle you are, calling people out in meetings always leaves bad taste. Unless you're best friends, and if the group is very, very small, that's different. I'm talking workplace meetings. Try this, see how it works, and compare it to calling others out. Because when people are too quiet, it's the same problem. So problem number 3 and 4 are the 2 sides of the same coin. And that's where saying this is an important issue we are discussing. It'll be great to hear everyone else's opinion on this. I'll be glad to start. Always, I'll be glad to start. And then we can go around the room. That's true. Listen to what Dr. Snow said. Often the quiet person has most cogent opinion. But sometimes they're so tired of just, somebody who's languishing in a workplace, feeling like nothing ever changes anyway. They don't even feel like doing it anymore. That's right. That is absolutely correct. We need cogent opinions, coherent opinions. By the way, if it's any consolation, I do lots of town hall meeting facilitation. This is what I do. Those emails, setting everything right, and then using these techniques. I can walk into a room and use this. Okay. So that's how, okay, problem number 5. Decisions and actions are not being documented. This is a very, very common problem. Because then it just goes on and on and on and on. Rather than saying, it sounds like we just made an important decision. Can someone repeat it so decision can be accurately recorded and we will have the documentation? And then once documentation is done, things move on to the next topic. Or someone will say, no, 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 wait, I have something else to say. Okay, okay, please. Otherwise, the documentation is going to happen. Okay. So that's where this is also important. So do we have enough information to document? Yes, I think we talked enough. Okay, let's document. And finally, the last one, the meeting is about to end without a review. This should happen at least when the 10 minutes are left. Otherwise, it can't be done in the last minute. You see, we're having such a productive meeting. I would hate to leave without being clear on what we decided and what's going to happen next. Can we take some time to review what we decided, what's going to happen next once we leave? This is a 10-minute warning in a meeting. This cannot be done at minute 55. By minute 45 to 50, this should be happening. Or if someone says, well, we're not done discussing, you say, okay, let's get done. So we'll have last 10 minutes documenting what we agreed upon, what we're going to do, what's going to happen next, that kind of a thing. That tells people these things take time. It's not like you'll be arguing till the last minute. That's pointless. So these 6 high yield methods, you can take it in your next meeting and then write to me what happened. Is that a deal? And please, respectfulness, being respectful is everything in this. This doesn't work if you use a sarcastic tone. Okay. And by the meeting 3, when you have done it a few times, people will look to you as the person who knows what's going on. This last one is very quick and easy. The most common problem with delegation is people confuse delegation with training. Delegation is offloading. Training is upskilling. We use skill will matrix. Somebody with both the skill and will is who you delegate to. You may have to upskill them. You may have to coach them. I get it. But you choose wrong candidates because then you'll have cycles of poor delegation and I'll just do it myself and people are lazy. So even when you're going to train your staff, because that's really training, that write better emails or run interference for me, you're going to train them because they don't have the skill yet. They have the will, right? So you'll be upskilling them and then saying, okay, now you do this. So you will know what you're doing on that given day instead of confusing the two and then say, people are just lazy and I'll just do it myself. So this second page where I discuss 4-step delegation, you start the documentation, which is the operations manual, use Google Doc. You can share things, people can write in it, you can write in it, you can add videos in it, right? You can put pictures in it, do whatever, it doesn't matter. You edit it, it doesn't matter. These things are really superficial in delegation. You have a good candidate, you will have so much fun at delegating, or you can even start by asking them with this diagnostic in mind. Do they have the skill to do this? Do they have the will to do this? Why would they do it? Before you start these kind of things. This is the same thing with meetings, meeting trainings are more like, even facilitating meeting trainings are all about doing things like have agenda, share agenda. All that is really not realizing the purpose of the meeting is we can't solve problems without meeting. And here we are doing just meetings because they are on our schedule. Sean has a very good question. He said, do you have any suggestions for where the best place to train meeting facilitators? Do this. This is meeting. I am training you right now. Start with this, expand on it. Today, you asked me some questions which helped me expand on this thing. So learning is a living thing this way. You're going to hear from 14 people who have tried these things. You ask them how it worked out for them. because they have been doing these things in meetings for the last 2 months. So please listen to their stories as they explain. In fact, in a few minutes, I'm going to just stop talking. We'll take a little break, and then they will start telling you their stories. So that's where this is something that has become like a thing of its own, where the meeting itself sounds like you have to have some kind of clever tricks, versus the good meeting begins way before actually the meeting begins. And those emails and writing good emails, those three of them make a good meeting possible. How does it sound as a beginning, as a early thing to do? Sean, how does that sound? Does that sound doable? Yeah, good. Thank you, Dr. Castillo. Okay, so that's it. So we went over these things: speaking, workplace emails, workplace meetings, and we have the delegation. But do you realize how they flow into each other? So speaking and delegation, you would think they are not similar. But once you realize that actually conceptually you have to choose, are you going to educate or train or coach, or are you going to, so this one right here, and this skill will matrix when I drew this. This applies in speaking, this applies in trainings, this applies in meetings, this applies everywhere. So you can choose what to do next. So that is sort of where this part kind of like comes to an end. And that's where I would welcome your thoughts. By the way, we had great chat. The chat was very live and well. Thank you, Sean. That it's the great chat which makes for a good meeting and a good presentation. So that's why I love these virtual programs, because we can do it live rather than asking questions at the very end. So if you have any questions, that's fine. Otherwise, we have a 15 minutes break. At 30 minutes past the hour, that's 17 minutes break. We will start, but get back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you, Russell. Good perspectives. Perspective is the concept, the context. So if you, a good perspective, good context will drive good work. Good communication is driven by good perspective. That's exactly right. So we have a 15 minutes break. Let's meet again, and then I will tell you the story of what we have been doing for 2 months. Okay, let's take a break. Okay, well, it's 5:30 for my time, so it's 7:30 on the Eastern Zone. And so it's 30 minutes after. Thank you, Chad. So we have this next section. What we're going to do is I will introduce to you what we did in the last 2 months. I'll walk you through very quickly, because I want you to hear their stories. Yeah, I can tell you, but I interacted with them for 2 months. And at the same time, I want us to be present here, because these meetings and online meetings can be taxing on the mind. And I want you to use your mind, which is good, as in, one of my teachers calls it the upper brain, which means you're using faculties which can be hard to access at the end of a busy work day and in the middle of a conference when you're kind of absorbing a lot of new things. So for like 7-8 minutes, let's do a quick mindfulness meditation. And it's very simple. It's very basic. Mindfulness meditation means the nature gives us a mind whose natural state is mindlessness. And being mindful can feel a little bit effortful, but and being mindful will help you learn more from your colleagues who are going to present after that. So Let's see. Hi. I want you to make sure. Can you hear or no? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So you heard I want you to make sure, right? And if you can't, please let me know. Okay, let's start. That you never use this when you're needed to be alert and awake, for example, driving. Otherwise, let's get going. Start by settling into a comfortable position and allow your eyes to close. Begin by taking several long, slow, deep breaths, breathing in fully and breathing out fully. Breathe in through your nose and out through your nose or mouth. Allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. Bring your full attention to noticing each in-breath as it enters your nose, travels down to your lungs, causes your abdomen to expand, and notice each out-breath as your abdomen contracts and air moves up through the lungs, back up through the nose or mouth. Pay attention to flow of your breath. Notice how it's different as the air goes in and then goes out. You may feel the air cool as it goes in and warm as it goes out. If you are distracted by noises in the room, notice them and then bring your intention back to your breath. Simply breathe as you breathe, not trying to change anything about your breath. Don't try to control your breath in any way. Observe your experience in this moment without judgment. Just pay attention to each breath going in and coming out. If your mind wanders to some thoughts or problems or feelings, notice the wandering. Watch the thought and then let go of the thought. Let go of the thought like a leaf as it floats out of sight down the stream. Then bring your attention back to your breath. Your breath is an anchor you can return to over and over again when you become distracted by thoughts, thinking about problems or feelings, and notice when your mind wanders. Watch for the thoughts that distract you. It is in noticing that you become mindful. With this mindfulness, you learn to observe your thoughts and focus your awareness back on the quality of your breath.
Practice coming home to the breath with your full attention. Watch the gentle rise of your abdomen on the in-breath and the relaxing, letting go on the out-breath. You may be distracted by discomfort in the body, pain in any part, or twitching or itching sensations that draw your attention away from the breath. You may also notice feelings, maybe sadness or unhappiness or frustration or feeling content. Acknowledge everything that comes up. Simply notice where your mind went without judging it, pushing it away, or clinging to it, or wishing it were different. Just refocus your mind and guide your attention back to your breath.
So now this meditation has come to an end. You can gently open your eyes, be aware of everything that's happening around you, and up and awake. That's it. Any thoughts on the meditation? Because I want your mind to be receptive to what your colleagues are going to present to you. They are busy doctors like you. So none of them were like specially chosen for this thing. And they volunteer. So here's the quick context of what they did. The context is that, as I mentioned before, that in our education system, medical education system, who knows what the left side diagram is called? It has a name. Who knows the name of that thing? It's called Bloom's taxonomy. It's the heart and soul of pedagogy. And CME conferences are run based on pedagogy, where it's all, driven by the speaker. So the lowest form is information you can remember, maybe you can understand it, but then you can apply it. But then education starts happening when you start analyzing it, or you can evaluate independently. But then you own it when you can create something. But how about creating things together? It doesn't even exist in Bloom's taxonomy. And that's where it fails. So the education methodology that we used for this program is different, even though we have to write things like, you will learn this and you'll do this. So the idea that even creating thing is not enough. Sharing is even more important and then learning from others in andragogy and adult learning. That's where human needs, they have been very simple. I mean, we use Maslow's hierarchy because it's just one way to understand it. There are other ways to understand it. But as you go into higher needs, need for esteem, need for self-actualization, it is not a superficial need. Need for love and belonging. Right now, we're in the middle of an epidemic of loneliness. How do we cut down loneliness if we're not even talking to each other or sharing our experiences? So when we created this program, it was the spirit of Maslow's hierarchy of needs that runs through this thing, and not just, Bloom's taxonomy. So what we did, we sent out an ad about 2.5 months ago to the membership. This is a Shackleton's ad. Shackleton was a famous South Pole explorer, and they were lost, and how he led his people to safety after they wintered over in South Pole 100 years ago. He's considered one of the greatest leaders of all time history. So I sent out this ad, and of course, lucky for us, a lot of women answered as well. So I call it Ambitious Healer's Expedition. You are a healer. And I talked about ambition in you. An expedition means you go together, which means you'll go far, because the individual goes on a quest. So even though they did go on quests and expedition together, there's always 3 steps. There is a problem, there's a monster to be slayed, or some boon that has to be brought. A gold nugget has to be brought, a milk river has to be brought, right? A tree of bread has to be brought. And then there's the adventure, but that doesn't complete the quest or the expedition. Then you have to tell the story. So these are these people's stories, and it plays out very well in children's stories. These are their stories. These are stories of learning and growth, knowledge and experience. So we'll have 6 of them today and 8 of them tomorrow. So what we did was we met for the day 1. I did the training that I walked you through, that you already did with me today, the meetings, the speaking meeting, email, and delegation. In fact, they have helped me refine it. It wasn't the same, so I have learned from them already. Number 2 is, what we did was that we went over this document, which you have in your email. So you have a training document, but there's a pre-program prep document that is worth 4 hours of CME. And this is very simple, watching videos and looking at, what's kind of going on type of thing. And so that's what we did. And I will walk you through that one. Just give me a second. Yep, right here. So it's a very easy document. It has CME worth 4 hours, and it does take 4 hours. I don't mind if you speed up some of the videos. So the first one is that evidence-based assessment that I mentioned earlier, character strength assessment. That's number 2. Number 1 is, what do you want us to do more, and how can you become more focused, is the feedback they gave me as well. This is introduction to ethos, pathos, logos. It's a very easy 12-minute video to watch. Death by PowerPoint. That's one of the most watched YouTube videos of all time, 20 minutes, and death by PowerPoint. How to start a speech. There are only 3 ways to start a speech. I recommend one over the other 2, but you can choose your own. And what should be the first sentence, first words? How can you engage people right from the beginning when you're even setting up the context? Very, very good. Excellent, excellent video. In fact, when you're saying how can we start the trainings, these are the things to learn from. These are high yield videos I have put together. Watch how character strengths are to be used. Our brave explorers used their character strengths or combination of them. After doing that assessment, I helped them use them. Now, these three videos are three commencement addresses. That's again a very interesting word. Instead of graduation, we say you're starting your life, commencing your life. This first one is by Dr. Yvonne Thornton. She uses one device over the other two. So I want you to watch the video and try answering these questions. Which rhetorical device did she prefer over the other two? Same with this one by Hans Rosling. This is again a very, very highly watched TED Talk. Hans Rosling was a physician from Sweden. He was a WHO researcher as well. And he presents data, debunks myths. But see what he's talking about and what is the main rhetorical device he uses. And then this is Dr. Berwick. He's talking to a graduating class as well. See what rhetorical device he uses. And the bonus question is what's common between the above three speeches. Now, this one is advanced. So we talked about why they should listen to you. Why this, which is the context. This is why now. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. This needs its own thing. But these are the foundational videos and articles to read. This article in number 4 is the most read and sold article in Harvard Business Review. The first step matters more than the others. So when doctors are trying to break into administration or when they have to talk to administration, why now? Why should this go on the top 3 in the strategic initiatives, strategic planning initiatives? This is the foundational stuff for that. And this is some fun in the end. Life After Death by PowerPoint. You watch Death by PowerPoint. This is Life After Death by PowerPoint. This guy is very, very funny. He always makes funny PowerPoints and is a comedian who uses PowerPoints to just do comedy. And these last two are also about meetings, how bad meetings are like. And we did three meditations. You just did one, mindfulness. We also did compassion meditation and luxuriating eating meditation. So 3 different weekends. So tomorrow morning, bring a mandarin or a clementine. We will do luxuriating, savoring eating meditation. So that's all I asked them to do. And that's what our brave explorers did. So now I'm very excited to listen to what these brave explorers are gonna tell us. So let me introduce one by let's listen to what they have to say. And you can ask questions in the chat and I'll be moderating the chat as well. So the first speaker is not a stranger to people here. This is Dr. Libby Smith. And by the way, each and every one of the speakers is so well accomplished. It's amazing what they have done in their life. It's so amazing where all they have left an imprint, an impact on everybody. Dr. Smith is a fellowship trained is a laryngologist in Department of Otolaryngology. She's director of UPMC Voice Center, is a professor at University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. She received her degree from University of Health Sciences College of Osteopathic Medicine. Then she did her otolaryngology residency at Ohio University in Dayton, Ohio, and then fellowship at Thomas Jefferson University. She specializes in diagnosis and management of vocal fold paralysis, neurogenic voice disorders, early glottic cancer, and physician well-being and surgical ergonomics. She specializes in that as well. She publishes medical manuscripts. She presents at local, regional, and national meetings as an expert in laryngology. And she has lived in Pittsburgh since 2005. She enjoys outdoors, golfing, playing tennis, and spending time with her family. Welcome, Dr. Smith.
One. If you can make that big. Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to start off by thank you for sending out the email to see if anyone wanted to do this. And it's something that I was excited to do to see if the things that I've been doing recently in the past several years, if there's anything else I could add. So I wanted to kind of go through that journey, and maybe someone can pick up some tips along the way. So this is my journey. I am actually currently in my office, and yes, it is almost 8 o'clock. My beginning slide has a million Post-it notes because I can't show you, but if I were to show this way, you would actually see I've got a wall full of Post-it notes. So it's sort of how I live my life, unfortunately. So, all right. So a little bit about who I am. A lot of you guys have heard me talk before, and I know a lot of y'all because I've been around a while. But just a little bit of who I am. So I tend to juggle a lot of stuff. So most important to me is actually that I'm a mom of these two awesome boys and a wife. And my mom just recently moved to Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of juggling of everything, in addition to all of the medical work stuff. And I purposely put this in small font so that you couldn't read it, but it's just to give an idea that, there's a lot of different plates that I've got going at one time. So having a way to organize my life makes it so maybe I can take down a couple of the Post-it notes. So the first part of my journey has been in doing these for the last couple of years is figuring out who I am. And only if I know who I am can I be more effective, right? Like, I am not a naturally funny person. That is like number 19 of the 20 things on the VIA. But I found in certain ways I can utilize it, but that can't be my number one, because that's not who I am. So I have to be honest about who I am so I can be most effective. So I'm a very linear thinker. So when we were asked to do this, I made it very okay, we're going to talk about the 4 hacks and how I've tried to integrate them with what I do. So I do a fair amount of speaking, for conferences, and tomorrow morning I'm leaving for the academy at 6 a.m. I'm super excited about it. And so I've gotten kind of used to over the years doing these. I hate talking in front of people, but I force myself to keep doing it, thinking that someday I'm going to get better at it. But one of the things I always think about is, why is what I'm going to talk about important? And so I can think of when I was much younger and less gray, my talks would be just this burst of just information and numbers and graphs. And now my slides are like a pretty picture and one little graph, and I can now feel more comfortable with it, so I can talk more about it. So I think that has helped me in delivering the importance of why we want to listen to this content. So throughout the years, the why me, I have to show to everyone that I know what I'm talking about. And I've actually found one of which you kind of alluded to, was that I almost find that the less I say, the better it goes. Maybe because I'm not a good speaker, but the less I say, the better it goes. And that I don't need to show off that I know everything. Because actually, if you say less, sometimes that actually demonstrates to everyone that you have command of the content and you really know what you're talking about. So that is something I've definitely changed in the last probably 5-6 years. And then, why should everyone care about it, right? So hopefully I give them that information. I try to present data now that can be remembered. So I try to use color. I try to make it larger. I try to simplify it. Sometimes making a story about it, as you were discussing earlier, is sometimes a little bit hard looking at scientific stuff, but still making it absorbable for everyone. And again, shorter is always better. No one is ever going to be upset if you finish 5 minutes earlier. And humor when it works. So for emails, I literally get, I wasn't joking, I get probably 100 emails in a half day. And so it's just exhausting. And I'm always so envious of folks when they can actually disconnect from the world and not check their phone for a week. I would have so many emails, I wouldn't even know what to do. And that, in my mind, is like horrifying. Not that I'm going to miss something, but just the massiveness of having to deal with that. So these are the things that I do. So actually, I actually probably send less emails now than I used to. And, if I can just bump into someone, I'd much rather give them the information in person. But is this message really necessary? Because, I hate getting 100, frankly, stupid emails that have nothing to do with anything, that it's FYI, but I don't need to know. so if the people need to know, I've tried really hard to only send it to those people. My title, this is one of the hacks that I found helps. My title has become so much more important than I used to make it. Like I used to just make it just like a meeting on Tuesday, but instead now I would say meeting Tuesday regarding blah. And so it almost ends up being that FYI, but it really gives the reader focus on do they need to attend to it now? Do they need to attend to it later? One topic per email. That is hard to do sometimes. And I never try to send like 2 emails in a row about 2 different topics. I'll actually purposely space them out. Sometimes I'll just type it at a different time, or I'll use that send at a certain time. I'll just like make it go send an hour later. So it doesn't seem like I'm just hounding people with emails. I'll give people now frank timelines, and that's good for me because it also puts the pressure on me to make sure I do my part before then too. So it keeps me accountable. The scheduled delivery. I do a version of the 321. Pretty much whenever I have like a minute of downtime, I'll clear out 20 stupid emails, and I'll only have the important ones left over so that when I do have that 20 minutes, I'll be able to actually focus on the ones that are important. I've created a pretty elegant filing system. It's a little bit hard to do on my phone, but on my computer it works really well, and that's been helpful with keeping priority and hopefully not losing as many emails. I'm one of those people where so when I was a backup, so when I was studying for tests and stuff, I would have the gosh darn cleanest house on the planet. And I don't love cleaning my house, but I would have the cleanest, I would go like nitty gritty cleaning because I'm one of those people where is if there's mess around me, I can't focus on the big stuff. So my way I work is I get rid of all of the quick emails. And then when I have set time, I'll like work on the really time consuming ones because that requires thought and sometimes planning. So I am the director of our voice center and swallowing and airway center. So there's a whole slew of people that kind of work in the same space. And something I started after going through this training was giving weekly shout outs to highlight someone who's done something exceptional throughout the week. And I don't do it for everyone every week because that would just be too much and maybe not real. And I want it to be real. So I'll try to find something and kind of rotate it around. So I kind of hit most of the team within a certain period of time. But it's really just a nice way to acknowledge people. And in today's day and age, the world goes fast and everyone's moving fast. And there's a lot of now thanks and quick stuff like that. But like taking that time to give people that moment of shining, I think I've actually seen a change in, I don't know if it's solely due to that, but it kind of coincided with that time when I started doing that, with people being just overall more generally helpful, willing to pitch in, and collaborative during that time. So, um, okay, so I unfortunately have to go to a lot of meetings, and I think the best meeting is the one that never needs to happen. But there are certain times when meetings do need to happen. So, like right now, I'm planning our big retreat. We all of us leave clinical duty for a day, and we plan our, like, what do we want to do in the next year, the next 5 years, 10 years. We go from nitty gritty to big picture, all that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to put together the itinerary for that now, even though it's in January. So it's like, why is this important, right? So, having that picture of why it's important and instilling that first and foremost is, I've really put focus on that. And I find that it's helped. I mean, I already know what the big picture is because I'm the one who's like setting it up, but I feel like it's helped the other people that I'm working with have a better sense, and then they come better prepared because I'll let them know ahead of time. I hate when people just spring stuff on folks because I'm not a quick off my top of the head thinker. So I like to like marinate over ideas. And so I'll give that information to people before so they have plenty of time to think about it. Another thing that I've made an active, and it's hard, it's so hard, is I try to just shut up. Like I'll throw the first thing out there and then I'll sit back and really try to be that facilitator to get the other people talking. Because I already know what I think, but I need to know what everyone else thinks. And I want everyone else to have a voice at the table. And so it is really hard sometimes to not just be like, oh my gosh, just say something. But um, trying to find those sneaky ways, as you were discussing, on how to engage people in the conversation, because oftentimes the great ideas aren't going to come from me, it's going to come from everybody else. So listening and being an active listener is has really helped. At engagement of people, I still struggle with it. If It's always hard when you've got a handful of people who just don't want to engage, and you can't force people to engage because then you just seem like you're putting them on the spot. So sometimes it's a pretty fine line. But I actually start some meetings with like a fun task. Like, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? Right. And we go around the room and talk about that for 2 minutes. It just cuts the ice, and then we kind of get into it. And sometimes that helps with engagement. And then I had never thought of the 7-17-37-70 rule, but it's so true. So I've started using different forms of delivery based upon kind of what I want to get out of it. Um, and so being more thoughtful on what exactly am I looking for so that I can figure out how to get that information from people, and get them to engage in a productive way has been really helpful. So lastly, delegating. This has been, I've been told over and over, you got to delegate more, you got to delegate more. And I've always been one of those people who just goes and finishes it because I'm like, well, I know how it needs to be done, so I'm just going to go do it. But at a certain point, I literally don't have enough time in the day to do it. So the hardest thing that I have is figuring out will. So skills I'm not worried about because I can teach you how to do something. But trying to discern if someone actually has the will to do something is, I find, really hard. Especially when medical students are coming up to you over and over saying, hey, I want to write a research project with you. you give them a topic and literally nothing happens. And I'm like, well, it's not my job to babysit you through this. I'll mentor you through it. I'll coach you through it, but I'm not going to do it for you. So it's sometimes tough. And the same thing with junior faculty. So I'm now one of the senior faculty people, and I start my 19th year on Tuesday, actually. And so now we've had a concerted effort to increase the number of females in our faculty, which is great. And so, I'm a mentor to several of them just because I've already been there, done that type of thing. And so, to that end, I took some coaching lessons on how to be a peer coach. And so, I'm trying to utilize all those to help with that delegating and eventually mentoring and coaching. So this is my second to last slide. So there's a difference between mentoring and coaching. And I guess I was taught that coaching was a little bit different than the way that it was described here, but rather more like, how do you help someone get to where they want to be, right? And in professional coaching, that's the kind of that's a big ask, right? And it's really driven by the person who's being coached. So we ended up talking about this thing called menching, which is a mixture of mentor and coaching, which inevitably always happens. And it turns out that this is almost kind of already a term, which I do not speak Yiddish. I know that's shocking, but it's very interesting. So a mensch in Yiddish is a person with integrity, morality, dignity, with a sense of what is right and responsible, to be supportive, to be a friend, to be calm in troubled times. And so that's sort of what a mentor coach also is. When I'm in these situations now, I'm trying to think of it more globally than and I'm trying to use the strategies that we learned through this training and other ones that I've done, and the VIA, realizing what do I bring to the table. Like, I know I bring logical thinking, right? Like, I am very linear. What do other people bring to the table? Maybe they bring more excitement, right? And so engaging others to follow their passion will make them be better, as well as myself. And then we all work towards our collective goals, because that's like my big process right now, is trying to move things forward. So as we looked at the high yield hacks for speaking, emails, meetings, and delegating, this is what I want my journey to continue to look like in the future. Not all the post-it notes, but more clarity of thought, calmer, just a sense of serene and peacefulness in a chaotic world. And a lot of these things have helped me not totally get there, but definitely getting there on the way. So that's it.
Very good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, you mentioned that a power structure in a meeting can kill good ideas. And that is so very, very important. Let me ask you something. Of all the strengths, which one ends up energizing you if you use it?
So I think that what energizes me is hope,
Okay.
and really hope in others, and now seeing others succeed in becoming better versions of themselves, as well as hope for what I can do to improve a situation.
Very good. So, have you ever seen that doing this too much becomes a problem, hoping too much?
Right. So, my job doesn't allow a lot of space for hope. It takes time, right?
Mhm.
I mean, most of what I do is like bang, bang, boom, boom, boom.
Mhm.
And, it's interesting because that's the way my brain kind of works, is just get things done. So I'm trying to be more mindful
Mhm.
of my compassion, the hope side, the more intangible kind of grace that comes with it all, which has actually made me a much happier person. And maybe things don't happen the way I want them to, but now I'm okay with it. Whereas before I was frankly pissed. It's like, why didn't this happen? And now I'm like, no, it's all good, because we're just going to keep moving forward from here, and we're going to take what we learned from this experience and move it on to another, and grow in the process. It's a much happier journey then.
This is such a thing, like, when we'd say physician, happiness, well-being, wellness, that actually this is a path that others can take. They can copy you. It's almost like when you were speaking, I could see, I don't know if others could see, that Dr. Smith is on the next mountain. She's made a bridge using these things to get there. And that is really what we are doing. You saw this in action. So who else has a question for Dr. Smith? Dr. Trainer wrote, she's always dependable and consistent. In this academy, her words carry weight. Now that's a nice position. That's the ethos. That's the ethos. So if somebody asks you, you copy and paste this. This is what people in the college say about me. The people that give their testimonials.
Yeah.
There's your testimonial.
Humility should be up there high on my list too, because that stuff.
No, but you have it.
Yeah, I actually have stopped like putting all of my accolades on like the first slides of presentations. And I actually, it's interesting, because for the longest time I always wanted to have that there, because I wanted people to know that they need to listen. Now I'm like, I don't care if they don't want to listen, that's cool. But hopefully, they'll decide I have something interesting to say.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else, if you get any question, we can ask Dr. Smith later on too, but that was fantastic. And I hope you see what I was talking about, next mountain. Okay, now let's listen to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Donald Morris. He's a board certified and fellowship trained ophthalmologist. He's also from Pittsburgh area. He provides comprehensive general ophthalmology and advanced cataract and lens implants and medical care of glaucoma. He's past president of the AOCOHNS. He's president-elect of Pennsylvania Academy of Ophthalmology. His practice philosophy is to treat everyone the way he would treat his own parents or family. And his current interest is baking brookies. If you have never had them, you're truly missing something great. And if you haven't heard Dr. Morris speak, you have truly missed some great real life experience. So here is Dr. Morris.
Well, thank you, Dr. Singh. Since one of the tasks we're talking about tonight is texting, I have some interesting facts to start my talk with. Did you know the world record for texting a 25-word message is 18.9 seconds, set by Marcel Filo of Brazil in 2014? So that's 8.79 characters per second. And if you think about that, this gentleman must have the most awesome and incredible thumbs that exist. Another fact about texting is that excessive texting has caused an injury that's now called text neck. And there's an institute in Florida devoted to treating pain in the neck, back, arms, and shoulders of frequent texters. So knowing this, it's another good reason for taming our texting and learning all the things that we're learning in this seminar. As in previous years, Dr. Singh has started us with preparation activities. These activities included articles, lectures, and videos about writing, speaking, among other things. I learned a great deal from this work. I started off by learning about ethos, pathos, and logos as rhetorical devices. And intrinsically, I think we all have some understanding of these three things, and we use them without even realizing that we're using them. Ethos is the appeal to character, pathos is the appeal to emotion, and logos is the appeal to reason. If you think about talks, articles, videos, books, and advertisements that you've seen or read, you've seen and experienced all of these rhetorical devices in use. I know that when I write or talk, I use ethos by telling stories about my experiences to bring out my character. I use pathos to connect with my listeners by describing my emotions as I come to epiphanies about myself and others. And I use logos when I use facts and figures to support my thoughts. I use all three of these to bring my views across, and I think all three are important. However, I think pathos may be one of the most important tools and also one of the most dangerous. The reason I feel we need to be careful when pathos is used is that it's much easier to appeal to negative emotions than positive emotions. We see this all the time in our news and politics, and it can jade us into believing that everything is hopeless or negative. Negative sells, and I'd postulate that we're psychologically programmed to remember negative more than positive, secondary to survival instinct. Generally, negative things could kill you and positive things didn't. So we need to be really careful about letting ourselves be manipulated by this rhetorical tool. On the flip side, appealing to emotions can also make us feel great, as evidenced by all the animal memes, especially the cat memes, and the Ted Lasso memes that bring smiles to our faces. We just need to make sure we understand the context of what is being fed to us and use our intellects to decode and read what we see and see what we're reading. As important, we also need to make sure that we don't fall for using what is a popular belief as truth in our talks, and that's called argumentatum ad populum. We're so constantly bombarded with information that it becomes easy to believe that what we hear around us must be true. We need to remember that many times there's no fact-checking of this information. And again, we need to use our intelligence to determine the truth. So what does all this mean? To me, it means that we're all human and therefore all capable of being manipulated with these rhetorical devices, especially pathos. This is done by advertisers, politicians, drug reps, and other humans, either well-meaning or not well-meaning all of the time. So my take home from this part of the lecture in these devices was that they make us better writers and speakers, but they can also be used for mischief. And we all need to use our intellect and check facts and figures as we make meaningful decisions. My next part of the prep work was watching a PowerPoint entitled Death by PowerPoint and listening to the talk about how to start a talk. My first take home was that if you start a presentation or talk with, "Hi, my name is, and I'm going to talk about," that's basically the signal to your audience to take out their cell phones and tune you out for the next 30 minutes or so. How do I know that? Well, I'm completely guilty of the same thing. As soon as someone starts that way, I generally pull out my cell phone. I also learned that a human being has the capacity to absorb up to 6 or 7 things on a slide or from an article, but really we're best with only 3 things. So there is a way to design your talks and slides with this in mind, and this will really help your listeners. A caveat here, however, that I did discover is that you have to have some situational awareness when you use some form of this. I recently gave an update on my State Ophthalmology Society for our regional meeting, and it was only a few-minute talk, and it was in between the educational talks of someone else. Thinking of this mid-year seminar and all the things I was learning, I was going to start off with a story about how I learned that starting off a talk by just stating your name and topic gives permission for the audience to check out right away. Unfortunately, the educational speaker before me did indeed start their lecture with, "Hi, my name is, and I'm going to talk about." So I decided it would have been really bad form to embarrass them. In this particular case, I fell back to starting with my purpose and using a memorable tagline. And since it was an update on advocacy, I said, "We need your voice, your money, and you." And thankfully, it did work to capture the attention of the crowd without creating any embarrassment to another speaker. So definitely be cognizant of what the speakers before you were saying. Lastly, I learned about creating urgency. If you want to create a change culture, I definitely see the validity of urgency, but practically I couldn't see how you could create a sense of urgency in a medical practice without causing a panic. Most medical practice change is dictated monetarily, so how do you create an urgent change without panicking your staff? In talking with Dr. Singh, he couldn't understand why I was so dismissive of this, and I couldn't understand why he didn't understand my misgivings about it. And it turns out there are different definitions of urgency. As a doctor and surgeon, my understanding of urgency is that it's something that requires immediate attention and action. And an example of that could be a complication during surgery. The writer of the article on urgency defined urgency as a moving change over a few-month period. So it turns out there is a difference between the physician definition of urgency and the administration definition of urgency. In any case, using urgency to create change culture makes a lot more sense to me with the administration definition as compared to the physician definition. Moving on to my character strengths. Honesty was my top strength this year. It's interesting that my top strength changes from year to year. Over the last 3 years, my top strengths have been fairness, perseverance, and now honesty. I've spent some time thinking about why I've changed from year to year, and my conclusion is that fairness, honesty, and perseverance are all needed to be a good leader. I believe this reflects my current mindset as I move into a new leadership role, and honesty is crucial for self-awareness and effective leadership. And I know that I lack some of the institutional knowledge of some of the previous leaders, but I'm also confident that my experience, fairness, and perseverance and honesty will help me to succeed. I also recognize that leaning on the strength of others is key to effective leadership. Knowing that I have some of these inadequacies may be what's bringing honesty to the forefront. I also understand that honestly, it's okay to have areas that we need to work on. That's the point of being a human, to learn and grow. And without being honest with myself and others, that task becomes much more difficult. We also meditated with Dr. Singh as part of the preparation for the midyear, and I really enjoyed the luxuriating eating meditation more this year than I had in the past. Maybe it takes time to appreciate it, or maybe the citrus fruit I had this year was particularly good. But in any case, I found it to be a very satisfying meditation. My wife even commented later in the day that I seem to have a calmer sense about me. I don't know if she was just saying that or if she really meant it, but either way, it made me feel pretty good. I've always appreciated mini meditation as a break in my day, and I've added them back to my daily routine when possible. This helps me to reset when I get home. It's also good for a mini break at work when things get crazy and I'm feeling behind, which is basically every day. Mini meditation definitely gives me the feeling of a break between one part of the day and the next. This in turn helps me to fix my mindset and move on to the second part of the day feeling like there was a separation, even though in many days there's not. Hopefully that makes sense. Moving on to the tasks. The tasks that I worked on were taming my emails and texts, learning and working on my speaking and writing, learning how to be a better meeting leader, and delegation. I found taming my emails and texts to be a fantastic and useful talk. I do a streamlined version of emails now with the reason for the email in the title. For example, this means that if I've received an email asking permission for something, I will put permission granted as the title. I've also removed the RE from the title and retitled things to the present topic of conversation. So many times the topic of an email conversation has changed, but the RE, which actually I found out can either stand for regarding or in the matter of, or actually may not have a meaning, still says the same thing and is confusing. I'm also trying to number my thoughts and keep them as close to 3 as I can. If I'm asking a question or answering a question, I'll only do one question per email. And this happens to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you also, that when more than one question is asked, many times only one or the last question is answered. I'm also working hard to not put extraneous wording into my emails. In the past, I've always been careful with rechecking my emails to see if there was nuance to them. And I wrote very wordy emails in text. For any of you who have ever gotten them, you know that. Invariably, there was some nuance, and sometimes that was taken negatively, even if not intended that way. Taming emails has taken the nuance out of my emails and decreased the amount of writing and time it takes me to write them. And really, I found this to be incredibly freeing. If I'm writing an email with something I'm unhappy about, I just say what it is I'm unhappy with. And if I'm writing an email with something I'm happy about, I can just say I'm happy. No nuance saves me time and worry about how something will be taken out of context. And it's truly a freeing feeling for me, and it's really saved me a lot of time and emotional energy. I've accomplished the same thing to a lesser degree, but still improved with my texting. Only one question or answer to a text makes a huge difference in following a text stream. So the biggest tip for both email and messaging is to only ask one question per interaction, and when answering questions, send separate text or emails. It makes things much cleaner and much less complicated in terms of figuring out if things are being answered, and which answer goes with which question. And I have to say, this task has really had a positive impact for me. The next task was writing and speaking, and I found that I am applying some of the same principles to both of these things. In my one-on-one with Dr. Singh, we discussed my writing and lecturing, and I've always considered myself to be a pretty good writer and speaker. I still have to admit that I could probably do better with each of these things. I've learned that it's better to have a purpose and state that purpose first, support it, and then finish the article or talk with that purpose again. This changes my writing style a bit, but for the better. And as I write my next article, I'll definitely keep this in mind and see where it takes me. As far as speaking in PowerPoint, I recently had a chance to moderate a pre-recorded lecture that I'd done. And while it was a good and informative lecture, it was still death by PowerPoint, according to what I've learned. I had way too much information on many of the slides, and the title was larger than the points I wanted the audience to focus on. I also didn't tell enough stories, and I did start off with, unfortunately, my name is Dr. Don Morris, and I'm going to be talking about the differential diagnosis of the red eye. So basically, 10 seconds into that lecture, I'm sure the audience had likely checked out and moved on to their cell phones to check their email and social media. I believe that because that's what my own behavior is. As soon as I hear those words, I basically pull out my cell phone too. In making your talk different or more appealing, the video recommended more animations or writing within the slideshow. And I agree that animations and writing, when done correctly, can help a talk. I also feel that when finishing a topic or moving to another topic during a talk, some sort of slide break is helpful, whether it's a picture or a comic or something to give the audience a few seconds to reset before moving on. Using personal experiences and personal stories also help to bring you and the audience together, although I find that's very difficult in a pre-recorded lecture. This lecture that I'm doing right now is a bit different as we're discussing personal experience. So I think that goes a long ways towards holding your attention, no matter how I do the presentation. At least I hope it does, and I hope it's interesting. The next topic was delegation. Delegation is something that I have a hard time with. Sometimes I wonder how much better my life would be, or with less stress, if I could manage to delegate some of what I take on. Determining what is truly urgent and or is important is part of what I learned in working on this exercise. And to me, family, friends, love, acceptance, forgiveness, making a difference for others, and the enjoyment of our own lives are truly important. What we do for our jobs is also important, and it really does make a difference, but it's also a means to an end. And sometimes I seem to forget that. I get so fixated on what I'm doing at work that I forget the above important endpoints, and those are things that we definitely need to remember as much as possible. I don't have an issue with delegating in the abstract. The problem I have is deciding what can be delegated and to whom I should delegate. Dr. Singh did give me a tool for this. The tool he gave me was something called the Eisenhower matrix. And the Eisenhower decision matrix consists of a large square broken up into 4 sections. And this is basically just like the skill will matrix that we did before. In this case, the sections are: number 1, urgent and important; 2 is urgent but not important; 3 is important but not urgent; and 4 is not urgent and not important. So number 1, urgent and important things are things I have to do myself, like seeing patients and working. Number 2, urgent but not important are things that can be delegated, like grocery shopping or getting gas. Number 3, important but not urgent are things that can be scheduled, like a routine doctor's appointment. And number 4, not urgent and not important, can be jettisoned or placed on the back burner. And that would be something like watching a TV show or a movie or something that I pre-recorded. So I sat down and I did this matrix with my wife. And it was interesting as we created my squares that we had to define that this was my exercise and not hers. Her things of importance and urgency are not necessarily the same as mine. So this led to an imperfect discussion of things that stressed me that I felt could be delegated or deleted. That further led to a bit of a discussion of how some aspects of things function at our house, which in turn led to a bit of hurt feelings on both sides. She felt that some of the things that I thought could be delegated or done easier or not done at all were an attack on her, and her response to me on this then felt like an attack on me. So at this point, we made the strategic decision to leave the discussion for a few minutes, then regroup and move back to an active listening exercise that let each of us talk about our feelings. Once we did this, the listener would repeat back what they think they heard, and once that was done, the first person would clarify their meanings. And it's always interesting how what we think we hear is most of the time not what the person is actually saying. Our interpretation of the other can be a product of our current mindset. Most of the time, what they're thinking is so far from what we think they're thinking. In any case, this exercise, along with helping to define what could be delegated and what could not, did reinforce that I'm not using my active listening skills enough. In the end, we did clarify the square. This made both of us feel better and also agree on some of the things that I felt could be delegated or get help with. In the end, the exercise was beneficial, but it definitely created some sparks. And that's something to keep in mind if you do this with your partner. Make sure and explain and understand what the purpose of the exercise is, and then make sure to use your active listening skills when discussing. For me, this was probably the most emotional part of the year's program, basically because it did create a little bit of spark between us, although it was all good in the end. Moving on to how to make meetings worthwhile and run smoothly. I've learned that just like writing and speaking, making sure the purpose of the meeting and if there's a vision statement for the meeting are made clear at the beginning of the meeting. It's interesting that some meeting leaders can keep things on track, and when things meander from the path, they will bring it back on topic, and others seem to get lost. If you're in a meeting where things get lost or someone's hogging the floor, this is what Dr. Singh was talking about before, but you can become a sneaky moderator and move things gently back to topic yourself. The best ways that I found to do this would be include speaking up when someone is off topic to gently direct them back on topic by saying that's a great discussion point and let's make a note of that for another meeting, but what do you think of the topic on hand? Or by saying to the person that is off topic or hogging the meeting, thank you for expressing your views so well, but we haven't heard from some of the others, and let's hear what they have to say. That will let you move the meeting back on topic without antagonizing the leader, or if you're the leader, it gently lets you move the meeting back on topic. So to summarize, the purpose of this year's midyear was to learn about and make us better at 4 chores of being a doctor: speaking, meetings, emails and text, and delegation. I had the most success with taming my emails. I will say not worrying about nuance, just stating the points I want to make and keeping only one question and one answer to an email or text stream has really made my life much better. The only issue with doing this is that you need to let people know. And I have added a note to most of my emails stating that I'm working on a project to tame my emails. And if they seem more abrupt or brief than they've been in the past, that's due to the project. And I really have had some people come back and say they're glad I included that because they thought I was having some type of an issue with them. So that's something to remember as you embark on this, is make sure to let people know. In terms of speaking, I hope I've incorporated some of what I've learned about speaking into my current and upcoming lectures. A caveat here is to have situational awareness. Be aware of who else is speaking and don't tell the story of how you've learned that just stating your name and the topic at the beginning of a lecture gives the audience permission to tune out. It can be really bad form if you do that before another speaker who starts with, "Hi, my name is," and I'm going to talk about. I've not had to be a sneaky moderator again recently, but I have been at a meeting where someone else has employed those skills and it worked incredibly well to bring the meeting back on track. Finally, delegation. I've become better at delegating. Realizing that we all have different skills, delegating to better use the skills of someone who has the skills you're looking for is so much better than trying to do a project yourself without having those skills. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And a good leader is honest about asking for help when they need it. This year's midyear was a bit less emotional for me than the last 2 years, but was just as helpful and useful. I feel so, and saying that it was less emotional is still not a statement on it because it was still emotional. And I feel so much emotional release from not having to continuously construct and reconstruct an email or text message, and also from going over delegation with my wife. I wanted to thank Dr. Singh for his direction in these projects over the last few years. It's been amazing to realize how we still have the capacity to grow and learn and benefit from others. And at age 58, I am so glad I can still be taught and experience new ways of thinking. So I'm going to end with this line. Honesty is the fastest way to prevent a mistake from turning into failure. And the author was James Altucher. Thank you guys very much. And I'm looking forward to everything else.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. That was fantastic, very, very honest, and you shared your life story, and that thought of degrees of urgency repeated itself. I have learned this, and I'm used to sometimes talking to non-doctors, and they understand that urgency, administrator urgency, and I have realized I sometimes don't translate this. And Dr. Aslam says excellent thoughts. So thank you. So in fact, let me ask you something, which is about, because you write a lot, very prolifically, you write, you can write and type very fast. I know
Probably too much.
So, and when we were talking, and we had another person comment, the Eisenhower decision matrix is very, very practical. So on this urgency scale, because I also learned how to teach from you and others. So on that urgency scale, how was that helpful, that Eisenhower decision matrix?
In terms of defining, some of the things that I consider urgent that don't really fit into the really urgent category still would always bother me. They would, things that I felt that I needed to do or had to do quickly. And I've realized with looking at that they don't have the urgency that I thought they did. That I don't have to be quite as fixated on them, or I don't have to do them as fast as I thought that I did.
Yes. So there is sort of like a subjectivity to urgency. And tomorrow morning, that's the first thing we're going to talk about. And in fact, this is what, and speaking with Dr. Morris and actually a few other speakers brought up this very issue. I changed that talk to be more relevant. I was going to talk about urgency, like corporate type, and how to say why now. But I changed it based on this feedback, this subjective urgency that has to be understood, the physician urgency versus administrator urgency, and how to accomplish tasks in that milieu and be more effective.
Yeah.
So thank you for teaching me. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Say, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So, Dr. Morris, I noticed that you had said that your strengths have changed on the VIA survey over the past couple of years. Have any of the lower rated characteristics, have you noticed a change for those?
So it's interesting. They haven't come up as much as I would have expected in some cases because you know, I wasn't a big meditation person, or I didn't think a whole lot of doing meditations previous, and I have found that they make a big difference. And I would have, it's interesting because I would have expected some of those things to come up a little bit. When I still answer it honestly, I think the leadership skills, things that go along with leadership, still come up at the top of my list.
Mhm. Very nice. Thank you. Any
Thank
other?
you, sir.
Yeah, any other questions? Anybody else has a question? Anybody? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on. Okay. Our next speaker, so like I said earlier on, for the first time, we have medical students coming in. And our next speaker is, by the way, I love talking to medical students. And our next is Jared Banks. Jared is an osteopathic medical student. He's a third-year student at Lincoln Memorial University, DeBusk College of Osteopathic Medicine in Knoxville, Tennessee. He's originally from La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was at Southern Virginia University with BA in biochemistry, and he graduated summa cum laude. He is doing a research year right now in the anatomy department. He's teaching the first-year medical students anatomy course and is involved with many research projects, such as in educational intervention using anatomy wet lab, studying internal anatomical and effects of morbid obesity. By the way, he shared an outcome with me, which was very interesting because he applied these speaking topics to just teaching medical students and see what he says about the results. Very interesting findings. In his spare time, he loves to mentor pre-health students. He spends time with his family and pursues his passion for health and fitness. Here we have Jared Banks.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Yes, so as Dr. Singh said, my name is Jared Banks. I'm from Lincoln Memorial University. I was invited to this program by Dr. Scorin. And, you know, going through this program, I tried to apply Dr. Singh's teachings of the Big Four chores to what I was doing in my teaching of the OMS1 anatomy course. And by applying these concepts, I was able to increase the OMS1 anatomy scores by 30%. And I want to tell you how I did this, because it was a lot of it came from what Dr. Singh was talking about. So I should start at the beginning, though. So like he said, I'm OMS3. I'm in my research year, helping the anatomy students. And that's involved in teaching lectures, doing review sessions, leading the anatomy wet labs, help them dissect and everything else. And in Dr. Singh's teachings, he talked about context, concept, and content, as we saw earlier today. And with context, what I tried to focus on with the students was beginning with the end in mind and show them what they're going to be able to do by the end of each lecture. And at the end of the lecture, being able to wrap it all up and summarize everything as concisely as I could. Concept, you know, that talked about knowing your audience. And some of these students have never had an anatomy course, or maybe they've never had like an anatomy wet lab. So you have to break it down for them and keep it as simple as you can. And as far as content, that might be the most important thing for them. And as I said, just keeping it simple, concise, and clear. And with the PowerPoints and everything, the death by PowerPoints, just trying to keep it as simple as we could. And I tried to do that in my presentation for you all today. So what did I do? How did we get these scores to improve so much? We'll talk about the lectures first. And we started with a big picture. And I'll show you a slide, a comparison of before and after in a moment. But we started with a big picture of everything. If we're talking about like the GI system, which is what we just previously had, we showed them the whole thing. And like, this is what we're going to talk about today and say why they should listen. And me specifically, I was just in their shoes 2 years ago. So they should listen because I just had this course and I know it's relevant and I probably have a good idea of what's going to be tested on. And as far as the approachment part, we talked about, are you a trainer or you're a coach? Like, what are you? For them, I'm probably an educator. I'm informing them with less questions and having more content. A lot of them haven't seen these kind of things before. And in our teaching and our approach to that, we tried more so to build upon concepts rather just spitting out facts. Facts are something that can fade away, but logic, building on those concepts, that's something that will really last in their minds. Having integrations within the anatomy, tying all the pieces together, that's where we really saw the big improvement in their understanding and everything else. I want to show you in a moment something that we did and what I'm talking about right now. It's about the portal venous system. So let's see if I can get to this. There we are. This was not my slide. This was a previous years ago. I'm not throwing shade or anything. The instructor for this, they were told that they should have less slides. So they capped it at like 40 or something. So what they had to do is they had to cut down their slides, but they couldn't cut down their the content, so they had to push more. And we can see a lot of things going on right here. I don't have a mouse or anything, but this is talking about portal hypertension. It's talking about the clinical manifestations of some problems, but they also use a slide to just teach the anatomy. So there's so much going on right here. You can see the caval system, the systemic venous system. You can see the portal system. And from this, they taught them all the little branches and all the little things. And these red circles are where the anastomose, and they come together with portal hypertension that increased, the liver cannot filter the venous blood very well, so it backs up into the portal venous system. And, you get something, as you can see over on the left, the caput medusa, or on the right, you can see esophageal varices and the internal hemorrhoids. So there's just so much going on right here. So what we did, we tried to break it down a little bit more. I mentioned before, we showed them the big picture. This is what you're going to be learning today. And then we went organ by organ, like this branch comes here. If we're using the stomach, for example, we have the left gastric coming off of the stomach and going to the liver. And we move on. And then, we have the splenic vein, and that's coming from the spleen over the liver. An important branch off the splenic vein is the inferior mesenteric vein. That's important because it comes down to where your rectum is. So if you have like a thrombosis in the proximal splenic vein, it can affect both the spleen and the rectum. So things like that, like little things we can use to tie together. We do that after we talked about the relevant anatomy. Because those clinical concepts, that's what they really gravitate towards. That's kind of glue that holds everything together for them. And an example of how we simplified it in this next slide, there we are. This is just talking about just where the rectum is and the internal hemorrhoids. The stuff on the left was largely the same for every part of the portal hypertension symptoms. And, just very simply, you can see where the X is. That's just showing maybe there's a thrombosis or maybe the blood cannot go into the liver properly. So it comes and it backs all the way down to where the rectum is. And that was really about it. Just really keep it really simple. And we bolded what we wanted them to know. The superior rectal vein, the portal system, and the inferior rectal vein. You could also say the middle rectal vein as well with the caval system. That's where the problem is right here. So they told us as they were going through their slides, you could see, like, oh yeah, you take one thing and then another and another. And it was broken down, they said at least, it was broken down very well. And it really helped their learning. So just keeping it simple and keeping it concise is really what we try to do for them. And that was all the lecture stuff, try to keep it minimal wording and everything else. For the lab, lab's a little bit different. They come into lab, they've already seen the things that happen in the lecture, so they have a little bit of an idea of what they're going to see, but it's not drawings and pictures, animated pictures and everything else. It's the real stuff. So what we did for lab is we also tried to be have a system and to break it down for them in a couple key points. The key points where we are, how are we going to do the dissection, and what are we going to learn from it. So at the very beginning, we make our announcements and everything else, and we have it's like 6 slides. It's not very long for our pre-lab PowerPoint. And it's just that we show a picture, if we're using the GI system, show a picture of the abdomen, and it's opened up, and like, this is where we want you guys to be at the end of the day. It should look something like this. And that's the where. The how is we just used 6 bullet points for how the dissection is done. They're supposed to read the dissector on how they're going to do the lab that day. We broke it down into 6 points so they had a clear understanding, because the dissector can be like 20 pages long and hard to comprehend. So maybe the points were, you're going to make a lateral incision, take the skin off, and then you're going to transect the greater omentum. You're going to visualize all the organs. You're going to clear off all the tissue for the vasculature and clear off all the tissue for the nerves. So something like that, something simple, but it can be like, oh yeah, okay, that's what I need to do today, because the dissector can be a lot of times. And that's the how. And the what is really what we want them to get out of it. And that's just a list of like all the structures. That's going to be more than 6 points, because there's a lot of structures you have to identify. But them having that, they said, really helped their understanding, because they knew what they're supposed to do. They knew what it's supposed to look like at the end and what they're looking for. And repetition and reinforcement, I think, is the key to learning. And afterwards, we would give them usually about 6 practice questions, like clinically relevant practice questions at the end of the lab, to test their knowledge of like what they saw that day and how it's important. And with the lectures, we were more of an educator and informing them of things. We took more of a mentor approach with lab. They've seen things before, and now it's time to really help them, show them how to do it, show them how to do the dissections as you're cleaning stuff up, quizzing each other and quizzing them. Like, oh, what happens if we clamp this artery? What will become ischemic? Or if I cut this nerve, what's going to happen from that? So things like that is how we use the mentorship approach for lab. And how did it turn out? Well, as I said before, it was a massive, great improvement. For the students, they have written exams, it's on a test, and a practical exams. They come into the lab and they have to identify the structures, and it's graded. For the written exam, it was the highest. The first exam was the highest average that they've ever had. I think it was like 86% or something like that. It was the highest that they've had. And we really attributed that to our teaching methods of showing the big picture, building off context and concepts, and breaking everything down. Our goal was just to keep it really simple for them. For the lab, that's when they had that 30% increase from the previous year. These were the first ones. The first ones are usually a little bit rough. In the past years, the average was like 65%. And in this year, it was like 86%. So 30% increase is what we saw. And we attribute that as well to just being able to break everything down and having everything concise. The faculty were really impressed as well. There's 3 of us, so I can't take full credit. There's 3 of us. I'm the only one that's in attendance here today. They approached us and they said it was the best delivery of the content that they've seen. It's coming from Dr. Singh's principles he taught us. And they asked that we just implement that to all the lectures and all the labs. And they were very pleased by it. And we were really happy too with how the students performed. And I was only going to talk about the speaking part of the Big 4 chores. I could go on about all of the other things, but I really wanted to improve my speaking skills with this. I'm an almost 3. I'm in my research year, so I'm talking to anatomy students, just any medical students all the time. And next year when I go into the hospital and everything, we'll be interacting more with patients and physicians, and I want to improve my speaking. So I focused a lot on that. The other things are relevant too in my life, but this is really the one that I wanted to hone in on. The other two things I'm going to talk about after this briefly is the strengths assessment and then a little bit of the meditations. Strengths. So these are my strengths. These are my lesser strengths, as it's called. The top ones, these are, I was not surprised to see these, kindness, spirituality, and fairness. I've always tried to, be close to my spiritual side and be a kind and a fair person. That makes sense. A couple of these lesser strengths, I won't lie to you, are a little bit surprising. Appreciation of beauty and excellence. I thought I had that. I'm not an artist or anything, or musician or anything like that. But I don't know. I thought I appreciated that. The zest I can agree with. I would not describe myself as a very zesty person at all. So that one I can get behind. This one, though, was tough for me to swallow. Bravery, especially with my dad is a macho man. And if he saw that bravery was on my lesser strengths, I don't know what he would say. So I thought I should probably improve that one. And one of the assignments Dr. Singh had us do was watch movies to let me back up. So these movies had a theme, and the theme was like a certain attribute. And you watch the movie, you're looking for this attribute, and how can I apply it to my own life and improve in that regard? And mine was bravery, and I wanted to improve that one. So I did the only thing a reasonable person could do was I watched the movie Brave. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so she enjoyed watching. She didn't really watch it; she kind of ran around, but I sat and watched as much as I could. And it was a good movie. It was a good movie. If you haven't seen it in a while, a very quick summary. It's about I believe she's Scottish, a Scottish princess. And she's supposed to get married to a suitor, and it's all arranged by her mother, and she really doesn't want to go through with it. So she's having this really bad conflict with her mom, and she's trying to resolve it through like witchcraft, and ends up turning her mom into a bear. And the story is about how she's trying to undo the curse that she did to her mom before time runs out. And there's also like this like side story of like an immortal bear, so she has to fight. At the same time, she's fighting off all the people that are trying to attack her mom because her mom's a bear. So she seemed really brave to me. She conquered the immortal bear. She turned her mom back into a human. And I'm thinking, like, well, this girl's super brave. Like, what does she have to work on for bravery? Why is the movie called this? And this is where I think it applied to me. I realized that bravery is not really this blanket term for everything in our lives. I think you can be brave in certain aspects and maybe less brave in other aspects. For her, she had a bow and arrow. She's going out and hunting and being in the woods alone. She's very brave. She's very independent to conquer like danger and everything else, or to face danger. I think her lack of bravery was dealing with her interpersonal and intrapersonal conflicts. She had the conflict with herself, not knowing what to do, how do I fulfill my destiny, quote unquote. And the interpersonal one was a big conflict with her mom. Did not know how to handle that properly, was scared how things were going to turn out. And I think that is what she worked on. That is how she became more brave, was dealing with those things. And how did she improve it? In the movie, she improved her bravery in those regards, little by little. It was the little things that she did. She started changing her thoughts that she had about her mom, started looking at her mom in a new light, which led her to start acting differently, to showing more compassion and more love to her mother. And I thought, maybe that's something I can do with my life. I might not be brave in this certain aspect, but I can change that little by little. So that's what I try to do. I try to start thinking a little bit differently about maybe situations I was hesitant to do or scared of. And I'm hoping that by thinking I can do it or thinking about it differently, I can start to look at it different, and I can act differently because of that. And that's how I try to apply that and improve one of my lesser strengths. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the meditations. There was 3 meditations. I think we're doing one tomorrow. It was compassion, luxuriating, and mindful. Oh, we did one today too. Mindfulness. That's what we did today. And my experience with it. All of us are busy in whatever we're doing in life, and the meditations were like 10 minutes long. And my first thought was not, my first thought, if I'm being honest, was, oh, it's 10 minutes. I could take that time to write out an email to do this and that and the other, right? But I'm like, no, let me just relax and listen to this. And Dr. Singh did such a great job. He did such a great job. It was incredibly relaxing. I went back and listened to it twice. It was really great. They were recorded for us. It was incredibly insightful. And I tried to think, like, what can I really get out of this? And my first impression was to listen to the thoughts or pay attention to the thoughts that I had during the meditations and right after. Because I feel like my mind was like really clear after that. And so I did that. I found my white space, as one of my professors mentions, and just started writing down what I was thinking during it and what I was thinking after it. And that was like really good stuff that I was writing. It was about how I can improve as a student, as a father, as a husband, and other aspects of my life. So I was very grateful for that. It was a very calming, very enriching experience for myself. And I believe that that is all that I wanted to talk to you guys about. Yes, it is. If I had to wrap all this up and bring it all back together, I talked about the big four chores of speaking. I talked about how I can improve in my bravery specifically, and the meditations and how relaxing they were for me. And I would highly recommend listening to Dr. Singh and applying his principles, because they were golden. So I thank him, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jared. That was very nice. When I spoke with Jared, he is very modest, by the way. And in the time we were talking, he started telling about this 30% improvement in scores. I said, you have to start with that. And I'll tell you what a showman would start with. It's one of those three openings, right? So when you watch that video, this is one of the three ways. Who here wants to improve their medical student scores by 30%? Now, don't you have their attention? That's like one way of starting. And he's very modest. I had to really push him to say, you have to start with this and explain what you did. And you heard a story of how something that most people find so boring, which is anatomy, can come to life. And when students are engaged, their scores go up without a question. This is so fantastic. So Dr. Snow has a question for you. Did your change in teaching method flow into a change in style of test writing?
Did it change the style of test writing? I don't know if it did. I didn't write any of the test questions.
Okay.
And I think they tend to reuse test questions and make them very similar. So I don't know if it changed how the test questions were written. Yeah, I don't think it changed how
So
the
you
test
didn't do
questions were
anything. So in fact,
written.
the students tackled the same questions better this year than
Yes.
That's
Yes.
one way of saying it. Okay. So Russell, did you get your answer? He didn't change the questions. They just came. They were still the same. Okay. And thank you. And he mentioned movies. And in your email, everyone's email, there are two lists of movies for your strengths, and one is a family-friendly movie list, which I had made last year on Dr. Solano, who's going to speak next, on his suggestion. Movies are a form of art, and they can teach us. Just like I mentioned the quest before, the character in the movie Brave, is fighting the big bear Mordu, but in reality, what she's fighting is what's inside of her. And what Jared did was also a quest. He went on a quest. He's a medical student who tried changing all these things, which is very, very brave. Changing senior professors' slides, changing their lectures, changing their teaching methodology is very, very brave. So you were brave in even trying all these things. And then there was an adventure, which was the teaching itself and the exams, and they came out good. And then he's telling us the story back. That's the story of an adventure itself. So you reinforce your strengths by watching these movies. And he chose one of my most favorite movies of all time too. So that's it. Very, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. But next time you can say, who here wants to improve anatomy test scores by 30%? I'll teach you how to do that. That's the best thing I've ever seen. All righty. Thank you, Jared.